It took me hundreds of hours, or maybe you could say thousands of hours to make this image, but it's hard to really, with my interference pattern, this is another of my Archimedes, I say my hands did it. I guess in a lot of ways I can't call it mine, because without the entire worldwide technology infrastructure, the information may never have come, well, it certainly wouldn't have ever come to me. And I wouldn't have been able to do the simple things that I've done without the complicated tools and machinery and electricity and, you know, anything any of us do depends on anything any of us do that is good. 99.9% relies upon the good that is done by everybody. It's that 0.1 or that 0.01 or that 0.001% that we ourselves do. But that isn't to, because in a sense this is very important. So that small number or that small decimal point, however many orders of magnitude to the right of the decimal point, isn't to diminish the importance of the smallness of my contribution or your contribution, but emphasizes the importance, the necessary importance of fine-tuning of a body whose capillaries are healthy. The great contributions of capillaries that do their job, and especially in a world, in a diseased world, in a diseased body that is still alive, is still mostly working. And that's because of the extra work that the individual cells do that's a little bit extra. So yeah, this took me hundreds, maybe thousands of hours, but if I took all, even just the ones I've posted, I mean, I must have 1,000 hours worth of videos that I've not posted that are all iterations of things I have posted. And but even if I took all the interference pattern videos that I've posted, I could say each one took me, 1,000 hours, but they're all based on the same image, this like Darwinian evolution tree. So the time overlaps because this branches off here, this branches off there. It's kind of like I worked for a major corporation for 5 years, and well, not major, but major. Uh, I guess at that point, well, I guess at this point it's I don't know, maybe a $12 billion a year corporation. They weren't then. Maybe 20. I don't know. When I was there, it was a $5 billion a year corporation. international. And what I learned while I was there was this corporation manufactured. So they made their widget. They sold their widget for $1 to the warehouse. The manufacturing arm, this corporation was involved in raw materials, separate companies of the corporation. Manufacturing, separate company. Distribution, separate company. Wholesale. And storefront, separate company. So I won't deal with raw materials, but we'll deal with manufacturing. Manufacture a widget for $1 in one company under the corporation. Okay, so now the corporation manufactures something, sells it for $1 to the distributor or wholesaler. So that's $1 of sales that the corporation just sold to itself under a different company. The wholesaler or distributor then sells it for $16. So now the corporation has $17 of sales. Even though right in the okay, so the manufacturer sells it to the distributor for $1. The distributor sells it to the storefront for $16. The storefront sells it to the consumer for $40. So that represents $57 in sales. $17 of which is false, kind of, because the corporation absorbs the expense, but the corporation says, well, I own this business, I own this, I own this company, I own this company, I own this company. These are our sales, this is our market share. So it's like artificially inflating market share. But everybody does it. Everybody does the same thing, so it's across the board. So like 17 of those dollars don't exist. That's a really simplistic and pretty much wrong way of thinking about it, but also it at least begins to dive into the logic of it. And the same with my work. It all kind of overlaps. But that gets me also thinking of like fiat currency. And there's a lot like Bill Still, and of course all the conspiracy theorists, not even conspiracy theorists, alt media talk a lot about fiat currency, from Alex Jones to Max Kaiser to Lyndon LaRouche to Michael Moore to whoever. I might be the only person on the planet who will outwardly say that uh, I don't just believe, I know that despite Nixon removing, because there's the gold standard and, the whole deal with Nixon removing the dollar from gold and how, the day after 9/11 we were supposed to pay back China, for their gold, and then 9/11 happened and we didn't have to, and da da da, and all conspiracies on top of conspiracies on top of conspiracies. Never mind what the time travelers are doing to try to keep this shit all fucking checked out. Fiat currency is one of the greatest inventions of all time. Fiat currencies, people talk about the power of cryptocurrencies now. I'm more on this 7 Bomar front. There's going to be something else. Fiat currency is it's a stepping stone to crypto, and crypto is a stepping stone to something else. A transparent, a different kind of currency, a revalued currency. Because crypto's kind of horseshit, and like there's all this blockchain stuff and all that, but people rely too much. First of all, well, I won't go into all the things that people rely too much on. Never mind what I rely too much on, but people rely too much on encryption. That's the wrong way to go. It's going to take a long time, a couple hundred years probably, before that debate even hits the surface. But complete transparency is the way to go, and knowing what everybody has. The surveillance state isn't necessarily the wrong thing. It's complete transparency every which way. The government knows everything I have. I know everything the government has. I know everything you have. You know everything I have. It would take a lot of philosophy to explain that. But anyway, in this, well, I'll just say one more thing, a couple more things. I think I've alluded to it before, but like fiat currency, fiat lux, let there be light. Fiat currency, let there be currency. Current, currency. What speed does electrical current travel? Speed of light. Let there be light. What's so great about fiat currency is that it is based on nothing, because paper money has no value. It has the value that we place in it. That's what makes it a major innovation, because it's imaginary. And the imagination, for all practical purposes, the imagination in this discussion, the imagination is the most valuable thing that we have, besides our hands and our and our bipedality. Is that the right word? Bipedality. The imagination, the intellect, the intuition is the most valuable thing we have. What we are able to envision and do. Fake money is imaginary money, is money whose value is derived from the imagination. And we'll talk about derivatives in the stock market. Well, derivatives in calculus, infinite, infinities, Euler, calculus, the imaginary number, I, square root of -1. And that's not meant to take anything away from God. Made in, well, his. There's a lot I could say about that. A lot of that has to do with vernacular of the day, but and then also all the spiritual ways of discerning between him and her that have nothing to do with male and female sex or gender, but the male and female aspects within us. But made in God's image. Made in God's image. Image. Imaginary. Imagination. Imaginary number. But of course, the imaginary number, a lot of it, I is given precedence over like the cubed root of -1, or rather the cubed root of complex 1. Because if we just did a cubed root of 1, there wouldn't be a problem, or a cubed root of -1, there wouldn't be a problem. We wouldn't have to invent I with the cubed root of -1, right? This would be -1 times -1 times -1, and then we can still just stay on the number line. But because there's a square root of -1, we know there's a complex plane. But then that opens up the complex plane to every complex root of 1. Anyway, one of the things I like about this image, and again, it's interference patterns of Archimedes spirals, and I just followed my intuition with most of this stuff. I do plan on trying to systematize, making a new base image Archimedes spiral, and then I guess creating a systematized math around it so I could make something like this with a one-page equation. Though I will say, I have 7,000 images or whatever, or 7,000 files or plus or whatever, got like 30 gigabytes of low resolution images such as this. And so much of it was based on intuition, and a lot of them I'll never be able to get to again. It would just take too long, and I've kind of like cleared, I've like blasted the walls down, and it's like the infantry can come in behind me, and I have more walls to blast down. And I have a lot of unposted work. But anyway, what I like about this, speaking of the imaginary number, is how, it's a disc, yet there's something holographic about it. There's something so harmonic about it that even in its two-dimensionality, and it's all just two-dimensional Archimedes spirals overlapped over each other, slid over each other, and so on, but in such a way, the harmonics are so spot on and rich and deep that a certain freeze-like three-dimensionality is just visibly apparent. And as it collapses to the line all the way down, so it's collapsing to a line two-dimensionally, but this animation was meant to make it look as a, a disc rotating. But it's just a circle crushed down into a line. And then back out. So it's also a little bit like nodes of a vibrating string. But the proportions and ratios hold all the way down to nothing. So like collapsing down to that line. But we can think of it in reverse, and we could also think of collapsing that line down into a point. So whatever it is about us and the universe and creation, how all those ratios are stacked down into dimensionlessness. In a lot of ways, I consider the zero dimension of a point and the one dimension of a line. I kind of consider those both as dimensionless. I I don't give a lot of priority to the single dimension, um, because it's still invisible. And that's also interesting that zero dimensions and one dimension are both invisible. And that 2 and 3 are both visible. Though it's, in one sense, it's questionable if two-dimensionality exists, even though hemispheric planes do, both in planets and magnets. But whether two-dimensionality can exist without three-dimensionality, or six-dimensionality, or four-dimensionality, or whatever. Yeah, it's kind of like listening to Max. I've been listening to Max Tegmark's audio, one of his audio books lately. I listened to it a few years back. He was talking about the flat, how the universe appears to be essentially flat. And this reminded me of that. Because in its two-dimensionality, it's clearly freeze-like. Like, it's not two-dimensional. I made it all with two-dimensional images, but their very structures aren't two-dimensional. It's weird. Certain ratios, certain proportions, certain things that we can do on a two-dimensional plane aren't two-dimensional if they're aligned correctly. Another thing about this image has to do with all the things I'm interested in, such as totem forms, stacked, hypersaturated totems. not as like a pagan in the sense of not being about God. People see that's the thing, man. People put like animal forms versus God or animal worship versus God when it's our place. Look at what we do to animals and look at what animals do to us. It's clearly a one-sided thing, right? We dominate the animal kingdom. Not in every situation, but just about. So far as we choose, right? Collectively, I don't mean me, just we in general. For better or worse, we dominate. But we have, obviously all things people say, so little respect for their place, for our place. Objectify animals as meat. Never mind their languages or teachings. And we always talk about like instinct, But animals teach their young things. Deer aren't just afraid of us because of instinct. They're also afraid of us because their parents teach them to be. This is also related to what I've been talking about theurgy. A lot of times I talk about like sorcery or magic or whatever. I've yet to include, shamanism. That might be a better, more palatable word that to my mind speaks of the same thing. You know, a lineage of prophets, a lineage of sorcery, a lineage of magicians, a lineage of shaman, disciples, apostles, a lineage of wizards, of witches, a tradition, never mind divinely inspired, God ordained, or philosophical theurgy, or daimonology, or demonology. It's all kind of speaking to the same thing. And to my mind, the best person to ever talk about it in a way where it actually started to make sense, even though it's very confusing. It actually is Carlos Castaneda. His entire work, you have to read all of it. And in all of it, it describes different types of beings, and not necessarily strictly in a hierarchy. And I remember one time I was listening to a person talking about UFOs. It was this woman at a UFO conference, and I saw it, on YouTube maybe 10 years ago. And I don't know if I'll ever find it again, but she was talking about UFOs, and when we're talking about extraterrestrial life, she was referring, like, look at the ocean. Look at how many different types of life are in the ocean. Like, it's a regular person pretty much couldn't ever wrap their head around it. A genius couldn't wrap their head around the diversity of life in the ocean. So, and it's not a hierarchy in the ocean. It's a series of interlaced hierarchies, a nexus of interlaced hierarchies. There, to my mind, there is a hierarchy. It's not the hierarchy of the Greek gods. It's not the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. It's not the hierarchy that the old Hindu, those beautifully ornate Hindu temples, which make a pyramid look like the most boring thing in the world. Like, I'm not saying the religion, I don't know enough about it. I want to learn more or anything about it, but the temples certainly suggest a very strong hierarchy, right? But that's still like this somewhat of a triangulation, a pyre comes to a point. Whereas in something like this, the point's in the center. But anyway, Castaneda kind of opens up that hierarchy. And, it's like in religious texts, we're talking about angels and archangels and demigods and Nephilim and Elohim and this god and that god and Yahuwah, Yehuda, Yahweh, Jehovah. Where are these words actually meaning the same thing? Where are these words referring to different things? Is the storyteller an inspired, intuitive storyteller who has inherited the story and used intuition to retell the story? Or is the storyteller a prophet who knows what these things are and is identifying them correctly? And how do we know? How do we parse these things apart? Have you ever seen anything? Has anything ever happened to you? Have you ever collapsed and had a vision? Have you seen things in your dreams or in your twilight sleep or in a waking moment? Has a thing ever slipped slightly in your experience? Something you can't explain? Have you ever seen something moving in the shadows just to find that it was the shadow moving? Ever? Something strange happened. Something strange happened. If 1,000 strange things happen, how many were the same? How many were different? How many were different but had the same cause? How many were similar that had different causes? Dark matter is penetrating us. Dark energy is penetrating us at every moment. Or, that's what they say. What is it? What is its structure? What does it look like? Is it just a hodgepodge? Is it structured just as the mycelial networks that we see, like roots underground? Like neural networks? Or is there even a deeper structure? A crystalline, a prismatic? And when I say crystalline, like the body's a crystal. The body's a prism. Light is shining through it all the time, visible and invisible. Today, when I was outside the job I'm at, there's no outhouse, so I just got to pee in the snowbank, So I was out peeing in the snowbank, and the sun was bright. So while I was peeing, I kind of turned my head up to the left a little bit and stared right in the sun with my eyes closed. Something I used to love to do as a child. Staring in the sun with my eyes closed. And that brilliant magenta, just that burning, flaming watermelon, puce, magenta, red, dancing, sparkling color. There's few experiences like it. It's one of the most simple, rewarding, joyful experiences. It's like an instant, it's like, you know, staring at the sun with your eyes closed is one of the most rewarding, blissful, joyful meditations. And then watching that red go black, and then white, and then yellow, and then red again, dancing. In a lot of ways, I wonder if that practice, staring at the sun with your eyes closed, is almost like truly enacting like some sort, I don't know, where the hemoglobin in the blood and chlorophyll in the plants are um, I wouldn't say opposites, but inverse. A kind of opposite, but not opposite because they're also complementary. I wonder what's actually happening. And I stared longer than I normally do these days, though I used to make quite a practice of it in my young adulthood and just as a child, naturally. I just loved it. Just lay on the ground, keep my eyes closed, look up at the sun. Didn't think about it. It was just great. But then opening your eyes afterward, and the way the colors take on a singularly unique quality. The other colors, once you open your eyes and look away from the sun, after having looked at it with your eyes closed, experiencing that brilliant pink, everything else looks different in a pretty unique way. can't remember the tangent that brought me there. But I do remember I was talking about the theurgic. Oh yeah, the things. There's always things. So that's actual visible light passing through our body. It's like if you shine. I took a picture of myself one time where I was shining a light through my thumb. There was essentially no other light in the room, and I shined a light through my thumb and took a picture of my face, and it was red. And when we put light through our hands, like if you just put a light, if you close your fingers together and shine a light like through your palm and look at the top of your hand, or through the bottom, put a light on the bottom of your hand and then look through your hand, like right to the skin. The pink of our blood is so bright. Like when you cut open meat, you butcher, where you see pictures of surgery and so on, everything looks so, meat. When you look at meat in the store, it just looks like meat. But when you shine a light through living meat, flesh, that brilliant color, if you took paint the color of meat and shined a light through it at the thickness of a finger, it would be nothing of the kind. But X-rays are going through us. Neutrinos are going through us. Dark energy is passing through us. Never mind the fact that it's probably suspending us. Puppet strings. Bazillion puppet strings. God's little fingers. Little angels. Little angles of light. Dark light. Bright light. Light we can't see. Superluminal light, so to speak. Time light. But whatever it is passing through us, what is the structure? It's not all just like an ocean. It's not all just like water. It's not all just like what we think of as wind. Never mind the structures we'd see if we actually could see the wind. It's not all just like that. There are deep spiritual structures. Deep. Every bit and more evolved than we are. And they pass right through us. And some stay. Some click in like a USB drive. Some that should and some that shouldn't. And anyway, this picture also speaks to that. And increasingly, I hope to enumerate these types of pictures so that when we think of math, we don't just think even something as beautiful as the Mandelbrot set. But to my mind, and I could be wrong, but to my mind, the Mandelbrot set reminds me of like psychedelics, and not all psychedelics are the same. But you keep zooming in, seeing all this very beautiful structure. Kind of like when you take a trip to the point where you lose your mind and everything that's here isn't here anymore. And I'm not necessarily harshing on that, but I'm more interested in seeing here plus. And I guess that's why I like these images, even though at this point they're not, and I may never develop this idea into something that has credence. But what I'm hoping to do is, because there's this idea that's just, an inspired idea. Not because it's mine, but because I'm open to it. So it's trying to come through me despite my, in spite of my, or despite my stupidness. It's trying to come through me. Because the divine intellect recognizes that I'm open to it. And saying, okay, we're going to push as much through, we're going to push as much through this fool as we can. And I'm hoping that I do enough that maybe I'll reach someone who can actually develop this. While also still trying to develop it more myself. But what I like about this type of image is that it, at the very least, it speaks to the idea of here plus, not how beautiful this other strange place is. But it at least speaks to here because, people harsh on anthropomorphism. That's the wrong way to go. Faces are important. And I also, when I say anthropomorphism, I actually also mean animal faces when I say that. Anything that's a face. Eyes, mouth, nose. And even when we look at beetles, like, they have different, it's different, but yet you know where their face is, right? The mouth ain't quite like a mouth. I mean, some, yeah, beetles, bugs, spiders. It's all different, but you know where their face is, right? And all the life that we know, the head's important, the face is important, the body's important. And that's what I mean when I say with this that it's here plus. But also with this and these types of images of the Archimedes spirals, which was a total surprise. I never knew I'd find this type of thing. But there are certain images with certain ratios and proportions of the same image overlapped over itself. Gives rise to images that mimic every culture, just about every physical phenomenon, every type of animal, every body type, every insect, every bird, every language, like actual textual looking objects. And again, I'm doing it in a little bit of a hodgepodge, intuitive, like just flipping over stones, just overlapping shit like crazy, and not in a perfectly rational way. But yet I'm using a very rational object and shifting it somewhat rationally over itself, proportionally in ratios, the proportions, the ratios, and just sliding something over till it clicks. And if you're into visual arts or whatever, or just anything, or you play two notes on a piano, and when you know which ones sound good and which ones sound bad, right? You don't have to have some huge fucking degree to know if you like a song or not, or to know if a song's well written or not. And you might not even like it and still know it's well written. That's beautiful, right? And that's how I've made these images. And a single image that can hold structures that look like totems, faces, text, that mimic physical structures. If we could find a way to engage that type of math and how that would tie together so many things. It just seems like it would be very useful. And there's all kinds of things I need to learn that's already out there that's very useful. It's just I haven't seen exactly this type of thing, you know. It's like it's a little bit like cymatics to another level. Or like, you know, what's his name? I'm having a brain fart. Fields of morphic resonance, fields of morphic resonance. Rupert Sheldrake, you know, a lot of his work. I think that there's at least an experimental, theoretical, mathematical there's like a, you know, this type of imagery I think could open up the interest that opens up, frankly, a new branch of math based on that's the thing too, is it would be based on very simple equations, starting with, you know, like simple, like someone who's okay at like 10th grade math could do this stuff, but have it be real and make discoveries, you know. That would be my hope. And maybe that's way too big of a hope for someone, quote unquote, like myself. But at the same time, enough shit's happened to me, enough things have happened to me that I realize I might, I'm putting it mildly, I'm on to something. And it's only a question of whether I can bring it, I was going to say bring it to life, but in a lot of ways, my message or the work that is trying like heck to come through me is more alive than I am. And I'm just trying to hold on. You know, I'm holding on with one hand, and with the other hand, I'm trying to do the work. And I hope I can hold on long enough to get enough, you know, to scribble my message, throw it in a bottle, and throw it out there, and hope it hits.